Hello, hello. Welcome back to the Katie Wellness Show. I am your host, Lindsey Katie. I don't know if you guys have noticed or if it has bothered you at all, but my podcast does not have fun, catchy music or a snippet of the podcast or even an intro of what you can expect from the show in general yet. And here's why. I decided to let go of perfectionism. Okay, so that may not be completely true because I've tried lots of times to trick my brain into thinking that I don't have to have everything perfect. But the problem is that it always goes back to the programming. The thing that I did to actually change this belief or this pattern I have of feeling like I needed to have everything perfect before I could move forward in my life, I changed the programming. And I'm going to talk today in today's show about what the programming is and what do I do to change it. Just as a computer has programming, our brains are programmed to do certain things. Um, One example is whenever you're driving to somewhere that you've been, a lot of times, you kind of start to drive in autopilot and you just get off on the exit that you know you need to get off because you're on autopilot and you've been there before. Well, our coping mechanisms work in very similar ways. Maybe we are feeling triggered is a word that's sometimes used. Maybe we're feeling a certain emotion, and usually when we feel that emotion, we react in a specific, maybe predictable way. When we reprogram our brain, we are telling our brain, oh, we actually need to get off on a different exit. Or, oh, when we have this feeling, we actually need to respond in a different way now. So that's what I'm talking about when I talk about change the programming. Change the programming, change the way that your brain perceives and responds to stress. I do this through emotional processing sessions. It is the modality that I have had amazing success with in my own personal life, and also I've seen it work in people that I work with in my clients' lives. I personally have done several emotional processing sessions on perfectionism as a coping mechanism. Coping mechanisms are good until they're not, right? We need to learn how to cope in stressful situations. But sometimes they don't always help us get our actual needs met. This need for perfectionism or this belief that I have to be perfect was ingrained deep. So it did require that I had to do several processing sessions. And there was never one reason for it. It was lots of reasons. It was my own personal tendencies, my own personality. It was nature, it was nurture, right? It was both of those things. But basically, it boils down to this: the human brain is programmed to stay alive by any means possible. And from the time that we are very little, we are subconsciously aware of the things that help us to get our needs met. Even before we are born, these patterns are passed down generationally. So not only are we picking up our own coping skills as we view what's happening around us and how people respond to our actions, a baby cries, it gets picked up, it starts to learn, hey, if I cry, someone will come to me. If I cry, I will get attention. The rules start to change when we're about 2 years old, when the crying no longer works. But even before we're born, like I said, these patterns are passed down generationally. So we're picking up our own coping skills through observing what's going on around us, and we're picking up what's being passed down. One simple example of this would be that, let's say mom is pregnant. Mom has the belief that I have to do it all, that no one will help me. And this belief is also passed down to the developing fetus. Once that child is born, the child can carry that same belief. They learn not to trust others or to ask for help. They become super independent and are even likely to be praised for it as a child, right? Good job. You put your shoes on all by yourself. Good job. You did this all by yourself, right? Which in children, that is what we want. But as adults, do we need to have praise for every single thing that we do? And also, when we take it to the extreme, this child who has this belief or this programming, I have to do it all, no one will help me, they become completely burnt out as an adult trying to do it all and do it all perfectly, do it all well, do it all to this unrealistic expectation, right? That's what perfectionism is having these very unreal expectations and feeling like you can't pivot, you can't change, you can't do something in a different way. And that has to be done a very specific way. It's very much black and white thinking that it has to be done a certain way in order for it to be perfect. So I was definitely caught in this pattern in a lot of my relationships, in a lot of my personal life. And I know that I'm not alone in this one because I have helped facilitate many processes that were some form of perfectionism or people pleasing. And in these instances, the programming says, well, I have to be perfect. And then what follows is negative self-talk or holding on to guilt or shame, self beat up, whether it's physical or emotional, right? Holding on to that guilt and that shame, replaying the situations in your head and just feeling embarrassed about how you reacted. These emotions start to wear on your self-esteem. These emotions are also held in your gut, in your stomach, in your center, in your core, which means you will likely start to have gut issues like irritable bowel syndrome or constipation or bloating or even brain fog via the gut-brain axis, right? We know that our gut and our brains are very interconnected and that changes to one affects the other. So when we hold on to these negative emotions in our gut, it doesn't allow for energy to flow and things start to slow down. So only until we change that programming can we learn to let go. Can we learn to take the new exit or form the new belief? This is one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about emotional processing. My very first emotional process um, literally felt like 10 pounds of weight on my shoulders had been lifted. I felt physically lighter, just letting go of some of those emotions. And it was like a big cry, a big emotional release, but I was guided through visualization exercises, through age regression exercises, through role play, and also through inviting in my higher power to help bring his healing energy and his healing light. And as I have continued, as I went through the emotional processing certification to become an integrative processing technique facilitator. That's a lot of words, but basically it just means that I can facilitate these types of processes using this modality for other people. I have had so many people come back and say, hey, it helped my headaches to go away. It helped my constipation to go away. It helped me to stand up for myself. It helped me to have my voice. It helped me to get rid of guilt and shame and step out of perfectionism. Reprogramming is such a powerful tool when it comes to healing, when it comes to emotional release. And there are similar modalities that do this. One thing I love about, I guess I love a lot of things, but one of the things that I love about emotional processing or integrative processing technique is that it can be done over the phone, or in person. It works with the subconscious mind, and it also is that programming. It is changing the brain. It is changing the neural pathways in the brain to find a new way to get our needs met. So, my new way, I'm no longer stuck in perfectionism and I am moving forward in my life. I'm no longer stuck. I don't have these unrealistic expectations of myself. Um and I'm showing up. I realize that this podcast is not exactly how I want it. I would love it to be super professional. But if I waited for everything to be perfectly in line with how I want the podcast to end up eventually, I would never get it done. I would never start because I would be too overwhelmed. So instead of waiting until the perfect time, instead of waiting until I have everything perfectly figured out, I'm just starting. I'm just going to start where I'm at. And as I get better and as I get more comfortable and as I gain more skills, right? Because I've never done this before. So I have an idea of what podcast creation looks like. And I know the different apps, but it takes time to research the apps and it takes time to do all of the tiny little things to make a successful podcast. I'm a one-woman show, and so I'm doing it by myself, and I'm starting where I'm at, and I'm letting go of perfectionism. And if you need help letting go of perfectionism, if you need help moving some of that stuck embarrassment, shame, guilt, even the generational patterns, book a discovery call with me, or let's do an emotional processing session. We can do it over the phone. It takes about an hour and a half to 2 hours. And it is one-on-one time that you get to release emotions, to change the way that your body perceives and responds to stress. So, whatever it is that's coming up in your life, whatever it is that is feeling heavy or keeping you stuck, we can process through those emotions. A big one for me has been perfectionism. So, I hope you guys enjoyed this show. I would love to work with you one on one. Reach out to me on Instagram or on my email. My website is in the show notes. So, reach out to me if you have questions, if you want to learn more about processing. I will do a full episode on what to expect during a processing session, just so you guys can be a little bit more familiar with the process. But I'm excited that you are willing to join me on this journey, even though my podcast isn't perfect, even though I may pause and it sounds awkward, or I maybe don't say the right thing. I'm glad you're here for it. I'm glad you're here for my humanness and my imperfectness, and grateful that we can be on this journey together. I hope that you'll join me next week, and we'll see you later.